I'm doing good, Anushka. How are you?
I'm good. How is your day going?
It's going good.
It's going good. So we have had our introductory session, and we have talked about the interview. We can start then. Tell us something about yourself, your background.
So basically, I'm an advocate. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from National Law University, Delhi, in 2020. Apart from that, I actually worked with a couple of organizations before joining this fellowship as a environmental and legal researcher. And most of my working experience, although in the law school, has been with respect to the intersectionality of law and environment. So,
Okay.
be it biodiversity law, climate change laws, pollution related laws, and so on. So, that was my academic and work experience. Apart from that, I was born in the place where Buddha got enlightenment, and my childhood was mostly spent in the different districts of Bihar and Jharkhand, and that kind of gave me the exposure to different realities of how the environmental damages, the planetary crisis is, uh, you know, it's turning out to be. So
Yeah.
be it the floods, be it to the mining, excess mining, be it the
Yeah.
pollution, be it the water and air pollution, forest cover loss, and so on, the crop diversity and crop patterns crisis, and so that I've been faced through the my childhood. With respect to my disability, during my school days, I had this retina detachment. So in I guess class 8th or something, I got this low vision in my left eye, no vision in my left eye, and low vision in my right eye.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of something.
Okay. So you worked with Javed Abidi Fellowship also, and in what
Yeah,
area did you work in that?
I actually carried out data-driven and evidence-based research, advocacy, and campaign endeavors concerning the impact of climate change on person with disabilities. Therein, I explored how climate change, one of the planetary crises, has a detrimental effect on every aspects of life of person with disability. It is not just
Yeah.
about the physical or mental health, but it affects their day-to-day life, increases their cost of living, decreases their quality of life, then causes and so on and so forth.
This is a quite innovative and new topic. I mean, none of the
Hmm.
fellows related to this or even in, close to this. So, how did NCPDP people and your seniors reacted when you said that you wanted to work on intersection between climate change and disability on that topic?
Before answering that question, I think there is a understanding that this is a new topic, which I fairly don't agree with,
Okay.
because actually at the global stage, the environment movement has started in 1970s,
Yeah.
and the first major legislation came in 1990s,
Okay.
and even then the COP has been almost 27 or 28 COP has already happened, which kind of established that we have a dedicated movement since almost 30 to 40 years just on climate change.
That's true.
Still, person with disabilities, specifically along with the older adults, have been the missing part of this advocacy and the research.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it is often perceived that, okay, this is a new topic.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a very old topic, even with respect to, we must have heard in 2016, a remarkable Paris Agreement was launched. That was the
Yes.
first international convention that mentioned that in its preamble that person with disabilities are one of the most marginalized community with respect to climate action. While after my graduation in 2020, when I was applying for this fellowship, I always wanted to intended to work on the intersectionality of climate change and disability. And thankfully, in 2019, it was the first time a UNGA resolution came that says that okay, we need to study and advocate for disability and climate change intersectionality. But still, that international resolution was not translating to the national scenario. So in
Okay.
that context, I sensed, because of my interest and passion for working on the environmental justice, as well as seeing an opportunity that this is not being done at the national level. Of course, even at the international level, it was just a resolution. It was not actually translating into the reality, because in 2023, a UNGA resolution of almost 190 countries was passed. It referred to every other human rights convention with respect to children, women, political rights, economic rights, but it omitted the even as the admission or the mention of UNCRPD. So even at the international level, it is like on and off and on and off. And even at the India level, because when you're talking about disability rights, the first and foremost thing is UNCRPD as well as the RPWD Act of 2016. They
Yeah.
both, in the respective Article 11 and Section 8 of the RPWD Act, does mention about disasters and how the humanitarian crises are affecting and the conflicts, but they actually didn't mention climate change
Yeah.
apart from other planetary crises. So it is not just about climate change. They even forget about mentioning biodiversity loss, how the pollution is impacting them. So I saw that kind of a missing link, and that's why I started advocating for this. Talking about the second part of the question, that how the people reacted. So in the initial maybe 1.5 year or something, the journey was a little tough in that context, because most of the people we are confusing it with even the other disasters, like how even the anything that is happening, be it the human induced disasters like fire and some accidents, as well as the even COVID. They were confusing it with the disasters and COVIDs and other humanitarian crises, which is very different from climate change. It took a time to establish them, but yeah, fortunately, after a long kind of advocacy and campaigning, it kind of turned out to be.
So the NCPDP people took some time to understand your topic,
Yeah,
but at the end they got through.
yeah,
Okay. So I've recognized that you're a very staunch believer of, advocating for climate change, and you are very related to that topic. I've seen in childhood, when you used to do paintings, that would be around climate change, and when you used to you did your law schooling, all the internship, all the projects were related to climate change. Now in NCPDP, your the area that you worked upon is also related to climate change.
right.
How are you so close to that topic, and how do you think that has happened?
As I mentioned in my personal story, that how since the childhood I lived in the regions of Bihar and Jharkhand. There I got the first-hand exposure to getting evacuated in a flood situation in North Bihar during in the Kosi River basin. Then I got exposure of in the Jharkhand water crisis and how the mining resulting in the pollution, air pollution, and so on. I also witnessed in my own villages how crop failure is happening because of climate change, and then
Yeah.
how also the deforestation is causing the heat wave is raising. I am presently located in Ranchi, the capital city of Jharkhand, which was once the summer capital of Jharkhand, and it was considered a hill station for the British India in the colonial times. But right now it is as hot as any other city.
Yeah.
It is no longer a kind of, if we say that it is a hill station, many people will consider a joke.
Yeah.
So in that context, my first hand experience, and also climate change is something that is affecting everyone and everywhere. So
Yeah,
it
that's
is
true.
rightly considered as a planetary crisis. That is not as a crisis of India or of America or Argentina. It is everywhere and is affecting everywhere. One, as well as it is also termed as a threat multiplier, as in it is not limiting itself to just one thing. So let's say if you're talking about just the, let's say, the issues related to disability sector that is very prominent, like employment, education, health. Indeed, they are very important, but they at least have one dimensions in that context. Of
Yeah.
course, it will have a spillover effect that is impacting others things, but they are not as broad as the climate change, which is affecting each and every topic that is interrelated to this. So, be it our health, our livelihood, our employment, our food and water security, the violences and discrimination, the disaster risk reduction, be it our movement and displacement, each and every aspect of our life, the cost of living, the quality of life, everything is impacted by it. So it was
Right.
always in my mind to work with. Earlier also I worked on the intersectionality of climate change and women, as well as the climate change and tribals in areas of Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. So that kind of also kind of helped me to gain more nuances and to how see, even if you are working in the climate sector, how it is very important to work for the disabled, population, because firstly I myself is a disabled, but also on a very logical argument that they are the most vulnerable.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
despite not contributing, they have contributed the least to climate change, and yet they are the most impacted.
Yeah.
So that kind of helped me to guess this decision.
As you said, that they are the least, who have impacted the climate change, but they are the most affected. Then, that is true that climate change nowadays is the topic of intellectuals and English speaking people. सिर्फ वही लोग इस बारे में बात करते हैं, एक्चुअली जो लोग
Right.
अफेक्टेड है उन तक ये जाता नहीं है. डू यू थिंक इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस टू take this topic to them, make them understand about it?
Yeah, definitely. Uh, there's a two parts of this. Firstly, I will talking. Yeah, indeed, it is a became an elitist topic because a lot of people are just doing it for because it is fancy to do with the climate change or environment.
Yeah.
But the thing is, its impacts or its causes and its solutions all are very simple. It happening because we are burning more fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Its impacts are very much like food and water crisis, and its solutions are very much easy, like reduce our consumption pattern, make it more sustainable, and divert do the more afforestation. तो चाहे इसका कारण हो या इसका सॉल्यूशन हो या ये क्यों हो रहा है और किस तरह से हमें इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, ये बहुत सिंपल है. और आई थिंक most of the people even at the ground level understand, but what is happening, the decision making process becomes very tough in that context. So when you're talking about, let's say, one of the premium organization working on this is IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So when they are trying to persuade the governments and the international bodies to come with some laws and policies and strategies, they have to calculate every single degree change in the atmosphere and how much the pollution is there, whether it is what is the AQI of Delhi, for example, to perceive a pollution. Of course, that is a separate example of pollution, but yeah, in that context, it becomes very technical. So let's say even I'm not actually going and finding what are the exact impacts. I'm mostly relying on the scientists who are giving me the evidences. So in that context, indeed, it becomes very challenging. Also, when you're talking about the language barrier, indeed, that is firstly because this whole research and the advocacy started in the West, mostly the US and EU. So that always has a thing because then only you have all the research materials, all the keywords and the concepts are in English. Also, being a lawyer myself, it is sad that we are also being taught and everything in English. So even we are more, familiar in working in English and having the access to the global audience. So indeed, that is a problematic, but that is more of a systematic problematic because if we are going to the Supreme Court and High Court, we can only practice and argue in the English most of the times. So there is a language barrier indeed that it has to be more in vernacular language. And when talking about vernacular language, the vernacular architecture is one of the solution to the climate change. So it is not just in one context we need to decolonize these things, the whole debate, but also in our solution also we need to decolonize the things. Also, in one thing, one of the American author, a very insightful article, said that international law is neither law nor it's international because it's mostly decided by the Americans. So the same way, even the climate movement is mostly, or the even the desertic movement, we are celebrating right now in July Desertic Pride Month because Americans did that.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that influence is everywhere. So we may be, decolonizing that slowly and stepwise. But yeah, I definitely I agree with your supposition. Yeah.
Yeah, as you said that everything is Americanized and English.
Yeah.
So do you think it is very important for us कि हम इसको तोड़ें and we can take all of these things to the ground level to people who are actually suffering?
या डेफिनेटली, क्योंकि अभी भी हमारा जो पॉपुलेशन है ऑलमोस्ट 65% आप देखिए तो गांव में ही रहता है. इवन जो ट्राइबल्स हैं वहाँ इवन हम लोग एक लैंग्वेज इशू भी अप्रोच नहीं रख सकते हैं, क्योंकि अगर हम जैसे समझते हैं कि कुछ हिंदी स्टेट्स हैं, कुछ तेलुगु स्टेट्स हैं, कुछ तमिल स्टेट्स हैं, इवन वहाँ पे बहुत लोग डायलेक्ट समझते हैं. तो अगर हम यूपी का एग्जाम्पल अगर दे तो सिर्फ सब यूपी में हिंदी नहीं बोल रहे हैं, कुछ ब्रज भाषा बोल रहे हैं, कुछ बुंदेलखंडी बोल रहे हैं. बिहार आएंगे तो वहाँ पे मगही है, भोजपुरी है, मैथिली है. सेम हर रीजन्स में हमारे डायलेक्ट्स भी हैं. तो ऑफकोर्स हम चाहे अगर क्लाइमेट चेंज के क्लाइमेट लिटरेसी की बात करें, तो जब तक हम उनको उनके लोकल लैंग्वेज में नहीं बात करें, बहुत सारे लोग होते हैं जो शायद रिटन फॉर्म ऑफ एजुकेशन से ज्यादा उनके लिए एक्सेसिबल होगा ओरल फॉर्म ऑफ एजुकेशन।
Yeah.
साथ में बहुत सारे लोग साइन लैंग्वेज के रूप में हमें क्लाइमेट लिटरेसी को कंटेंट है हमारा वो अवेलेबल करवाना पड़ेगा। तो
That's
जितने भी
true.
इस तरह के डाइवर्सिटीज हैं, बिट लैंग्वेस्टिक और डिसेबिलिटी रिलेटेड और जियोग्राफिकल, सारे ऑफ कोर्स जब तक हम बैरियर्स को नहीं तोड़ेंगे तब तक ये मूवमेंट लिटिल एक तरह से बोल सकते हो एलिटिस्ट ही रहेगा। क्योंकि
जी.
इसके जो जार्गन्स भी हैं, क्लाइमेट चेंज से लोग क्या समझ रहे हैं, ऑफ कोर्स जो मैंने पहले ही बोला कि उसके जो इम्पैक्ट हैं वो सब कुछ वो समझ रहे हैं, बट बहुत बार जो सॉल्यूशन है उतना हाई लेवल का होता है। जैसे हमारा नेशनल एक्शन प्लान ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज है या इस तरह के जो भी चीजें हैं, वो जनरली सब इंग्लिश में पहले आता है, और वो जब हिंदी या दूसरे लैंग्वेजेस में आते भी इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस में, तो
बाद में
इतना
आते हैं.
प्योर हिंदी में होता है कि जो हिंदी स्पीकिंग होता है उनके लिए भी टफ हो जाता है। या और बहुत सारे जार्गन्स का हिंदी या तेलुगु या तमिल या मलयालम ट्रांसलेशन बहुत डिफिकल्ट होता है,
That's true.
तो वो एक भी इश्यूज है। लेकिन हाँ, अगर हम एक तरह से ऑल ऑफ द नेशन अप्रोच से काम करें तो बिल्कुल इसको भी अचीव कर सकते हैं।
Yeah, that's true. So you rightly said कि हमें उन तक पहुंचाना पड़ेगा, and we have to change our the way we work. हमें orally काम करना पड़ेगा, and we have to use sign language and like that only. So why didn't you change your strategy at that time then? आप mainly वो material बनाते हैं जो advocates के लिए हो, या जो English speaking people या educated people के लिए हो, not those who are not educated or illiterate. तो आपने अपना एक जो strategy है, why didn't you change that?
या एक्चुअली इट वाज अ कॉन्शियस डिसीजन बिकॉज जब मैं मोस्ट ऑफ द लोगों से काम कर रहा हूँ तो डिजेबिलिटी सेक्टर में जब इंटरेक्ट कर रहा हूँ या फिर मैं क्लाइमेट चेंज सेक्टर में बात कर रहा था, द सेक्टर जिसको लीड कर रहे हैं उनके उनके बीच में ही ये टॉपिक नहीं था, इंटरसेक्शनलिटी को ज्यादा लुक फॉरवर्ड नहीं किया जा रहा था।
Okay.
तो माय स्ट्रेटेजी वाज लाइक इन द 3 years व्हाट इज द मोस्ट अचीवेबल थिंग, इस पहले जिस पे काम कर रहे हैं उनको सेंसिटाइज किया जा सके। फॉर एग्जांपल अगर सीओपी में इसकी बात हो, यूनाइटेड नेशंस लेवल पे बात हो, या गवर्नमेंट में मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ इन्वायरमेंट एंड फॉरेस्ट एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज के द्वारा बात हो, तो जब ये एक अचीव हो जाएगा तो मेन स्ट्रीमिंग विद इन द डिसेबिलिटी सेक्टर अबाउट द क्लाइमेट चेंज एंड विद इन द क्लाइमेट चेंज सेक्टर अबाउट द डिसेबिलिटी, तो जब एक ये मेन स्ट्रीम हो जाएगा देन इट वाज लाइक कि हाँ, ये 3 साल के कोर्स में अगर ये अचीव हो रहा है तो हम सेकंड लेवल पे जा सकते हैं। एज वेल एज इसमें एक और जो इशू मेरा हम सबसे मेन स्ट्रीमिंग करने का था, जब हम डिसेबिलिटी और क्लाइमेट चेंज को भी इंटरसेक्शनलिटी पे जब बात भी करते हैं, मोस्टली वो वन डायमेंशनल हो जाता है कि हाँ, हम डिसेबिलिटी को वन कम्युनिटी के रूप में कंसिडर करते हैं कि हाँ, एक वनर कम्युनिटीज हैं, बट एक्चुअली वो भी एक होमोजेनस आइडेंटिटी नहीं है। अगर हम सिर्फ और सिर्फ डिसेबिलिटीज की बात करें तो 21 रिकॉग्नाइज्ड डिसेबिलिटीज अंडर द आरपीडब्ल्यूडी एक्ट, जिसमें भी सबका लेवल ऑफ जो डिसेबिलिटी है डिफरेंट है। कोई 20% है, कोई बेंचमार्क डिसेबिलिटी 40, 60, 90, साथ में सबका डिसेबिलिटी का अलग अलग सेंसेस से अफेक्टेड है, अलग अलग डिग्री पे अफेक्टेड है, अलग अलग रीजन्स में अफेक्टेड है। तो फॉर एग्जांपल अगर कोई आईएच से अफेक्टेड है और वो अगर कोस्टल एरिया में रह रहा है तो ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट होगा। तो इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में मैंने ट्राई किया कि पहले इन दोनों सेक्टर के जो प्राइमरी बेसिक है, जो सबसे मोर अचीवेबल गोल है और जो पॉलिसी लेवल पे है, उसको इम्पैक्ट करें रादर देन गोइंग डायरेक्टली टू द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन लेवल। ऑल्सो ये भी था कि जब हम डिसेबिलिटी को एक होमोजेनस आइडेंटिटी समझ रहे थे, वो गलती कर रहे थे, उसके साथ हम एक और गलती कर रहे हैं, हम क्लाइमेट चेंज और डिसेबिलिटी को सिर्फ एक ही एस्पेक्ट ले रहे हैं कि इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, बट अब जो वो स्पेक्ट्रम है कि हमारे, जैसे मैंने पहले भी बोला कि कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग, क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ, डिजास्टर रेजिलियंस के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमारे मूवमेंट को क्लाइमेट चेंज इंड्यूस वायलेंस हो रहा है, अगर स्पेशली वुमेन अगेंस्ट डिसेबिलिटी एंड चिल्ड्रन विद डिसेबिलिटी, उनके एजुकेशन को, उनके हेल्थ को, उनके फूड एंड वाटर सिक्योरिटी को कैसे इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, तो वो जो स्पेक्ट्रम को नहीं देख रहे थे। तो दैट्स व्हाई ट्राई टू फोकस कि पहले एक जो एक फाउंडेशन क्रिएट करना ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट लगा मुझे रादर देन कि हम डायरेक्ट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन या डायरेक्ट टू स्प्रेड अपने आप को कर ले और फिर अचीव कुछ ना कर पाए। साथ ही जैसे मैंने बोला कि इवन एट द इंटरनेशनल लेवल, जैसे 2023 में ही जो यूएनजीए का रेजोल्यूशन आया था, उसने सारे ह्यूमन राइट्स को मेंशन किया, कन्वेंशन को, पर डिसेबिलिटी को मेंशन नहीं किया। साथ में एक इंटरनेशनल रिपोर्ट था कि ऑलमोस्ट 180 कंट्रीज में सिर्फ 30 कंट्रीज ने अपने जो पेरिस एग्रीमेंट के अंदर अपने कमिटमेंट शो किए हैं, तो उसमें डिसेबिलिटी का मेंशन ही नहीं है। सिर्फ 34 कंट्रीज ने मेंशन किया है, ऑलमोस्ट 150 से 140 कंट्रीज ने मेंशन तक नहीं किया डिसेबिलिटी का। सेम अगर आप इंडिया का देखिएगा, जो कमिटमेंट है पेरिस एग्रीमेंट को, उसमें भी डिसेबिलिटी का मेंशन नहीं है। ऑफ कोर्स वो आप बोल सकते हैं कि हम एक जेनरिक डेफिनेशन रख रहे हैं कि वल्नरेबल कम्युनिटीज, बट हाँ, there need to be much more focused attention, because क्या पहले से हम समझ रहे हैं कि इसका डिस्प्रोपोर्शनेट इम्पैक्ट होता है, और ये पॉपुलेशन ऑफ द ग्लोबल पॉपुलेशन ऑलमोस्ट 16 to 17% पॉपुलेशन है, और अगर हम इंडिया में भी अप्लाई करें तो इजिली 10 करोड़ तो होगा ही. That why I was focusing mostly on the law and policy making rather than just directly going to the implementation.
Now I got your point. You were more focused on the, as you know, policy trickles down in our system. So you're more focused on the above tier rather than the below
Yeah, like
tiers.
even with respect to UNCAPED, I said so that we made a representation to them, and actually UNCAPED acknowledged that and put on their website, and they are trying to amend the Article 11 of the UNCRPD, so that already have disasters and conflict and humanitarian crisis, but they are also ready to, and that's why they called for the comments for the amendment or general comments with respect to Article 11. So when Article 11 get amendment, the Section 8 of the RPWD Act gets amended in India, then the जो trickle down of effect होगा across the India or across the world actually, वो मेरा प्रायोरिटी था कि पहले इंटरनेशनल एज वेल एज द नेशनल लेवल पे स्टेज पे प्रायोरिटी सेट किया जा सके, चीजों को ठीक किया जा सके, देन गोइंग टू द स्टेट एंड द डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल.
Yeah, that's true. So Abhishek ji, climate change is a very vast topic. You know, it is a very broad topic. So when you work on a topic like climate change and intersectionality of disability, जो बहुत vast है और बहुत time taking topic भी है, and when
Right.
you face pressure from NCPDP to narrow down your horizons, what does a new age advocate like you feel at that time? Because at one moment you want this topic, you know, to reach out to masses, और आप चाहते हो कि ये topic को मैं proper सही से study करूँ, and this is a very broad topic and you want to study everything, and on the other hand, you know, you have pressure कि you have to narrow down your horizons, you have to limit your topic to one thing only. Yeah, right, you have to focus on a specific thing. तो जब ऐसा
Yeah.
pressure आता है, what goes on within you and how do you cope with that?
Yeah, so firstly, let's say the NCPD was more, of the view that we can focus more on Section 8 and how we can talk about mostly the climate change induced disasters and its impact on the person with disability, while I was mostly focusing on not just going to Section 8, but rather, widening my purview of research and advocacy work. So
Yes.
therein, my approach was mostly because अगर जब तक हम इसको एज ए फाउंडेशनल इशू नहीं करेंगे, फॉर एग्जांपल मे बी आई कैन जस्ट फोकस ऑन द हेल्थ पर्सपेक्टिव और जस्ट द लाइवलीहुड, दैट हाउ क्लाइमेट चेंज अफेक्टिंग द लाइवलीहुड पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी. तो माय स्ट्रैटेजी वाज मोस्टली लाइक अगर हम सिर्फ एक किसी डायमेंशन से फोकस करेंगे तो मे बी अगर हम वो अचीव भी करेंगे लॉ एंड पॉलिसी इंटरवेंशन बी एट द नेशनल लेवल और द इंटरनेशनल लेवल, दैट वुड बी मच मोर लाइक विद इन दैट वन स्पेक्ट्रम.
Yeah,
फॉर
that's
एग्जाम्पल अगर हम हेल्थ की बात करें तो मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ हेल्थ ने 2019 में पहले से एक नेशनल मिशन प्रोग्राम बनाया था कि नेशनल प्रोग्राम ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज ह्यूमन हेल्थ. तो अगर वो ऑलरेडी सिस्टम में है और ह्यूमन हेल्थ वो कवर कर रहे हैं तो ऑफकोर्स वो पर्सन डिसेबिलिटीज को भी केटर कर रहे हैं. बट जो हमारा नेशनल एक्शन प्लान ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज है 2008 का, उसमें ऑलरेडी अभी 8 मिशन थे. तो कोई हिमालयन पे काम कर रहा है, कोई एग्रीकल्चर पे कर रहा है, कोई स्ट्रेटेजिक नॉलेज पे कर रहा है. वहां पे एक स्कोप था कि जो वल्नरेबल कम्युनिटीज हैं, स्पेसिफिकली पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी, चिल्ड्रंस एंड ओल्ड एडल्ट्स, इस पे डेडिकेटेड मिशन हो सके, सो दैट अगर हम ये अचीव करते हैं तो पूरा वर्ल्ड पैकेज मिले पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी एंड साथ में दूसरे वल्नरेबल कम्युनिटीज हैं, रादर देन जस्ट एक वन डायमेंशंस में. तो बिकॉज ऑफ लैक ऑफ द फाउंडेशन एट द नेशनल लेवल, आई थॉट इट वाज मच मोर स्ट्रेटेजिकली वायबल टू गो for a umbrella legislation rather than just going in the one sector specific.
Yeah.
Because अगर वो हम अचीव कर भी लेते हैं तो मे बी शायद वो उतना लॉन्ग टर्म बेनिफिट नहीं होगा. जैसे ही वो हमारा अचीव होगा फिर हमें एक और जर्नी करना पड़ेगा स्टार्ट, कि अब हेल्थ में हो गया तो लाइवलीहुड पे जाओ, उसमें हो गया तो क्लाइमेट रिफ्यूजीज के थ्रू जाओ, कि कैसे पर्सन डिसेबिलिटी क्लाइमेट रिफ्यूजीज या फोर्स डिस्प्लेसमेंट एंड माइग्रेशन का शिकार हो रहे हैं. उस पर अगर अचीव हो जा रहा तो मैंने फील्ड विजिट में एक्सप्लोर किया कि कैसे क्लाइमेट चेंज स्पेशली हीट वेव के कारण क्राइम अगेंस्ट वुमेन एंड चिल्ड्रंस में बढ़ रहे हैं. तो हम धीरे धीरे सब पे करना वो मोर मे बी लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान हो सकता, but I thought it's better to have a umbrella legislation and pursue for that. Even thankfully NCPD team also understood this. They actually incorporated this suggestion in their dissertative manifesto also, in the point number 7, where we are advocating for national mission on climate change and vulnerable communities under the National Action Plan on Climate Change 2008, so that it caters need of each and every aspect. बिकॉज अगर हम लाइवलीहुड पे जा रहे हैं तो वहां पे भी बहुत सारे, स्पेशली हम गवर्नमेंट जॉब या फॉर्मल जॉब में जाएंगे तो वहां भी होता है कि हर डिसेबिलिटी के कैटेगरी के हिसाब से रिक्वायरमेंट जॉब्स होते हैं, तो
जी
वहां पे बहुत सारा निश आ जाता टॉपिक की, बहुत ही स्मॉल पॉपुलेशन को काटा करता है। तो आई
जी
फॉल्ट गिवन की जिस तरह का एक तरह से इन्वायरमेंट है, और इसके लिए मैंने फॉर एग्जांपल पार्लियामेंट में भी अपने क्वेश्चन सबमिट किए थे थ्रू एमपी, एंड उसमें भी गवर्नमेंट ने ही रिप्लाई किया कि अभी हम जो आईपीसी रिपोर्ट है इंटरेस्टेड उसी के बेसिस पे काम कर रहे हैं। तो मुझे लगा कि नेशनल लेवल पे ही अप्रोच करने का एक ज्यादा फ्रूटफुल है, बिकॉज अगर वो अचीव हो जाता है तो स्टेट लेवल और डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल अपने आप उस परस्यूट को फॉलो करेंगे, रादर देन अगर मैं सिर्फ और सिर्फ लेट्स से सेक्शन 8 के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में या डिजास्टर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इंडिया पे काम कर रहा हूँ, तो देयर इज ऑलरेडी सिस्टम इन प्लेस एनडीए में। तो जनरली परस्यूट फिर ये होगा कि उसको इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए परस्यू करो। और इवन विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू डिजास्टर्स, एक्चुअली DIDR डिसेबिलिटी इंक्लूसिव डिजास्टर रिस्क रिडक्शन जो गाइडलाइंस है 2019 में आ चुके हैं। तो एक्चुअली वहां पे जो मेन क्राइसिस है, इट इज नॉट अबाउट नॉट हैविंग अ पॉलिसी गैप और लॉ गैप, देयर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इज द मेजर थिंग।
या
While in the context of climate change, there is no law or a policy dedicated to person with disabilities or in general the vulnerable countries. So that's why this strategy was adopted.
Yeah, so you adapted this strategy because of these reasons. These are all the technical
Right.
reasons. पर जब एनसीपीडीपी ने आप पे इतना प्रेशर डाला कि नैरो डाउन योर होराइजंस, तब आपके मन अंदर क्या चल रहा था? हाउ डिड यू कोप अप विद दैट? हाउ डिड यू कोप अप विद दैट डिफरेंस ऑफ ओपिनियंस? डिड यू स्ट्रेट अवे डिनाइड, और डिड यू एवर थॉट कि नहीं मैं उनके हिसाब से कर लेता हूँ? वर यू वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग बिलीवर कि मेरे को ऐसे ही करना है? I don't want the technical details. I want what was going on
So
within you.
you can say I was a little stubborn to this, and so I met them in the in person in Delhi office and try to explain my perspective. And then still there were little disagreement that okay, maybe this may not be, this is too big a thing to achieve for. So I took a break. I prepared a toolkit for my advocacy and campaign thing. Even at the beginning of the fellowship, I prepared plan of action that how my whole journey of the fellowship should be ideally look like. So that I went with those prepared 2 months and prepared those documents, and then met with the NCPD team as well as the mentor and PI. Try to lay down my whole plan of pathway for next 1.5 years. And so then they got convinced of all this, and that how they see, okay, this there is a strategy to what I'm doing. So there was a understanding in the beginning that okay, 1 month I'm writing an article on impact of climate change on employment of person with disabilities. The second month I'm working on the migration of the person with disabilities. Third month I'm working on the health of person with disabilities. And the fourth is in the menstrual hygiene of the person with disability getting impacted by climate change. In the initial phase, it was considered that how I'm just kind of zigzagging and moving from one topic to another.
Yeah.
But then I came up with this documentation and everything. Then they understand that I'm trying to build an umbrella thing rather than jumping from one topic to another.
Okay.
So yeah, they understood me well. Yeah.
So you said that you wanted to take a break. So were there any moments
Yeah.
where you felt very burnt out or very frustrated? You didn't want to continue this thing. You wanted to take a break. Were there any moments? Tell us some instances about that.
So I took a break mostly for this very purpose that I just mentioned, but it was not like I don't want to do this topic or don't want to leave this topic. Actually, like many other fellows who may be pursuing multiple things, I was just pursuing this one topic.
Okay.
So it was maybe a fellowship in technical science, but it was more of a full-time job for me, because that has been my approach since the childhood or even from the graduation level, that I'm focusing just one topic at the time and trying to be more wider in that approach, that I'm taking every perspective. So when I'm talking about universal climate change and disability, I'm not just focusing on this small thing. I'm also looking for what is the health related, climate change related thing, what the role universal accessibility can play to it, what is the vernacular architecture can play to this, how is it happening in India, how is it happening in different other countries. So I'm building relationship and network with other countries, people advocating with the same thing, and so on. So I took a break, but it was more of a, okay, let's re-strategize myself, because there's a little, communication gap, or the team is maybe not, they wanted me to just focus on one thing. So that was a more of a professional decision to re-strategize myself and come with more clarity about what I want to do and document in a better way. So that was a thing. But it was never like an option that I'm not going to do this or not going to pursue this.
Okay.
Because from the day one, I was very clear if I'm doing this fellowship, I'm doing on this topic because for two reasons, because I'm already committed to this topic for my it's kind of my life, but also because I see that there's not almost very little has been done on this topic. I also see the opportunity that okay, I can actually have some impact on this. So for these two reasons, it was always clear on my that I'm not kind of doing this topic because it's maybe cool or because for the initial phase, I to be honest, many of people thought that why you are working on this. Even
Yeah.
the fellows, there are so many informal conversations. They're like, what actually is this climate change? So yeah, that was a struggle in the field. Even the people from Deserty community outside the fellowship and other I met, and they were like, okay, ठीक है, interesting topic, but they were not going into the what exactly you are doing in this topic.
Okay.
It was just a good, interesting topic for them.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the phase, but yeah, slowly and slowly it turned out to be good.
Apart from that, this is all work related. How was your relationship with others, the other fellows? Did you do anything apart from work? Did you enjoy yourself? Any fun and enjoyable moments you would like to share with us?
Not really. I mostly collaborated with them with the work related only, and actually that is a fun thing for me only to do.
Okay.
But I actually not just collaborated with respect to fellowship work, but I also collaborated beyond the fellowship work.
Yeah.
So, for example, that how I co-authored articles and things, not just with respect to how the fellowship theme, but also beyond that, made infographics and done so many things like that, and having conversations regarding cricket, politics, food, and exploring those kind of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Oh,
traveled
definitely. I
one
was.
or few times, yeah, with them also. But yeah, it was just with a small group of the fellows. I'm actually an introvert, so not much engagement. Actually, one of the funny incidents, maybe like I think the first interaction, proper interaction I had with the fellows was in almost fifth or sixth month of the fellowship.
Ooh.
For the first 4 or 5 months, I hardly interacted with my any fellows. Uh, yeah, they were like, okay, they are rude or something, but yeah, maybe. But I was more introvert, so hardly interacted with much people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was
So,
an interesting bit.
yeah, I was talking about any, fun instance. Like you said, you talked about food and travel and other things. I was talking about that only. So,
Yeah, after
any,
that, once I engaged in the after the initial 5 6 months, when the ice broke, then suddenly I started talking. Especially when I'm talking about the diversity, it is part of my both the personal and professional life. That's why
yeah,
I was always was interested to know what the fashion, the clothes you are wearing, what are the your local handicrafts and handlooms are, tourist attention and everything. Your lived experience with respect to climate change. That one thing that made me kind of initiate my conversation with most of the fellows is like because I was covering disability lived experiences with respect to climate change. So I
yeah,
in the cohort. The fellows were from all parts of India. So I was
that's
getting
true.
the lived experience from all climatic zones from India. So that was one insightful thing. And then, of course, the conversation about my interest for tourism, traveling, trekking, of course, and then little bit about cricket, politics, international affairs, and so much. There was some conversation regarding law as well, and even the in the formal context, how the RTI things. So I was aware of the RTS. So a lot of people engage with respect to how we can file and use RTI as a tool and so on. Yeah,
Yeah,
these are the kind of conversation.
that's
But
nice.
actually, I enjoyed the work-related conversation was really fun for me as well. Yeah.
That's nice. So, any instance, the whole journey, as this was a really intensive and long journey, any instance that you would cherish for life, जो आपको हमेशा याद रहेगा?
Nothing really comes to my mind right now, but it was a whole journey in the package is very good. But I can't
Okay.
pinpoint to one that moment. It was more like everything was building slowly, but gradually,
Any
but just like the how climate change thing is. So climate
anything that
change.
you took from this journey?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Let's say before joining this fellowship and meeting those cohort members, I was new to this disability sector.
Yeah.
I may be a person with disability. To be honest, I never saw myself as a disability because of the lesser degree of my disability. Also because my circle was very non-disabled in that way. In the law school, mostly I was talking about the laws and what is the in the spectrum of legal field and so on.
Yeah.
And little to some extent because of my interest for environment. So my friends from the environmental lawyers and so on. So in this sector, I got introduced to the whole spectrum of disability. In the initial phase, I was just listening to, okay, this is the person who's deserved in disability field. He and she is a legend and working for 20 years, 30 years. So I was getting to know also about my social media activity, although I'm not very personally active, but I run social media, the page, initiative, the Sangyam. So there also I learned from my fellows that how to use, make it more digitally accessible. So these things were very relevant. Also, I was aware about just my own condition, that how low vision can impact. And
Yeah.
I told you, as my degree is almost 40% disability, so I was not very understanding about the other disabilities, what are their lived experience and so on. So this was the kind of the best thing, that there's a kind of a spillover effect, because now I'm working in the same environment sector, but I have vast lived experiences, and that I use in my advocacy and research to greater level. So that kind of increased my spectrum to view the things, because earlier it was more like, okay, I was also just homogenizing, homogeneity, considering that is just one community.
Yeah.
Within this philosophy, I was knowing it technically, but not practically. I was not aware about how different disabilities are getting impacted differently, and how to use that, and how you need to have a standard operating procedure for every disability is differently. So
Yeah.
this was the kind of the greatest learning for me. Yeah.
So, Abhishek ji, as you said that you weren't very, you are just 45% disabled, and it was not from start. Earlier, your
Hmm.
both of your vision were correct. All of a sudden, you encounter 45% disability. How does that changes
Oh, it may be surprising, but it was just part of my life. I was never like, okay, it's just part of life.
one
The
time?
only loss that I fear is that I had, so much interest for love for sports, specifically in cricket. So in the childhood, I was very extrovert in the context of playing sports. I was like going and playing sports as a child for 4 or 5 hours continuously. That was the only thing I was like, okay, I missed out not playing cricket. But even after that, I was playing gully cricket and corridor cricket with my, even in the colleges and everything. Maybe not a professional level, but of course at the with the friends I still play. So it was just a part of my life. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading so many, pursuing vipassana, reading about of the concepts like pulsarth and so much. So it was just a part of my life. Like for example, whether it was in my hand to be born as a male, or in Indian, or in Bihar or Jharkhand. So just like that, disability is just my one of five identities. That's all. Nothing
The part,
positive, nothing different, negative. It's
but
just
this was
indifferent
not
to
the
in that
part
one.
of your life since childhood, right? You are being very diplomatic
I
in
was
this.
not a lawyer from the beginning either.
So, okay, the last question for you is like, how do you cope with feedback? At times, the feedbacks come from person who does not have so much technical expertise in, an area of climate change, but still the suggestion is quite logically agreeable, quite, it's quite sustainable. So, at that time, जब इंसान के पास कोई technical expertise नहीं है in that area, but the suggestion that the person is giving is quite logical.
Yeah.
So at that time, how do you take those suggestions? How do you take those feedback? How do you cope with them?
So I have kind of a process for this. So basically, when a feedback comes, so firstly I try to kind of think it not as just one step. Okay, I'm listen and reject it. No, I try to go back and listen, think of it to myself and even with my friends or colleagues at times. But mostly I try to consider the divide the any feedback or suggestion comes into that, whether their suggestions are more process oriented, or whether talking about more the result oriented.
Okay.
So when they are more result oriented, they may not be looking that seriously. For example, that okay, they are so telling to me to get more result from the desired result, and there the result is not within my all the times in my own hand or my own control. But when the suggestions are with respect to the process oriented, then I definitely look for kind of try to integrate, but then I also look for into how much feasible it is. For example, I will give the fellow example from my own fellowship. So there are some of the people who said that okay, you should why you're not covering the stories from the field visits.
Yeah.
So it was like a trade-off. Whether I'm pursuing the law and policy kind of advocacy research, and like within the fellowship journey, I almost published something 30 to 40 articles, my blogs and at other places as well. So what is my priority? Whether to do this or whether to go to the village and the rural sector?
Yeah.
Secondly, whether I'm going to the other sector, if that is feasible for my own disability, whether do I have the network there? So despite that being a process-oriented suggestion, it was part of my limitation of the study. So
Yeah.
that context, I was more pragmatic to say no, but because in my 3 year journey, these are my criteria, these are my process to achieve those things. So it may not be feasible for now, but yeah, of course, in future I may be incorporating those such things as well.
Okay.
But for me, when I'm talking about the feedback, I always thought it is always like to be clear with the people that I'm having a conversation about. So it's not whether I'm taking their approach or the feedback or suggestions, accepting that or rejecting that, but making communication clear is has been my prime motive. That I'm not just being diplomatic. Okay, you have said, so I will accept it. No, I will definitely try to explore that. How is the feasibility? Maybe the idea is very good, but that is not working for my case. For
Okay.
example, some people said that okay, in Uttarakhand, landslide is there.
Yeah.
You can cover those things. But being a person in Ranchi, maybe not that is not feasible for me to do it. And
That's
also, when I'm taking about such isolated events, then the cyclone in West Bengal, then I don't have the resources and the bandwidth to go to all those places and cover all the
cover all
stories.
those things. Yeah,
But I
that's true.
have the strategy and my commitment and my capacity and the competence to deal with the government and the international agencies to have just one policy rather than just going ahead and just collecting data. In that context, also, even if I'm going, I'm just collecting data as a social researcher and the legal researcher. Where I'm just talking about their experiences, which may very persuade and narrative is very strong, but for the policy making, we need the kind of balance of both. We need the hardcore factual evidences by the IPCC reports and some other organizations, and also the lived experience and the narratives. So I was trying to rather convey a document. I also had a postcard and interview sessions which I was conducting online, because when I was talking doing the interview sessions, even at the disability advocates and youth to disabilities who have been working in the disability sector for 5 years, 10 years, still for them it was a challenge to understand and gap what climate change is and how it is impacting. So even for them, I used to had introductory sessions of call and so on, and then they used to document their lived experiences.
Okay.
So I wanted to cover more of the spectrum that okay, I need to have lived experiences from every part of India, because it is not a homogeneous country, and every part has not just the diversity of the disability and the people and geography, but also the climatic zone. So I wanted to have the lived experience from every part of the country. I have with from the different age group, all the specific with youth with disabilities, then also of women with disabilities and also older adults with disability, but also document different disasters, climate change impacts that they are facing. So, for example, somebody is facing cyclone-related things, somebody facing climate anxiety, somebody is facing became a climate refugee that they have to migrate because of climate change impact. Somebody has to face disability-adjusted life years. Somebody has to face violence and so on, and as well as how their coping mechanism has been different. So I was trying to have the umbrella perspective again here rather than just going with what the feedback I'm getting, because
Yeah, I got that.
they maybe have the right intention, but I also need to kind of re-strategize myself, and taking a stock of what I am
I
capable
can
of,
do. Yeah.
what are the resources I have, and what are my priority areas are right now.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
One person can't achieve everything. There are so
Exactly.
many
Just
people
like
out
also
there.
people suggested me to go into the, let's say, the religious or the caste or the other intersectionalities within the disability sector. So then I said that okay, we disability itself has 21, and then the degrees are different. There are chronic conditions, there are rare diseases, which already form a huge diversity section. It may not be possible to then go to the rural section and
That's true.
all the things within the 3 years and achieve those things.
That's true.
Yeah,
It was lovely talking to you, Abhishek. Actually, we learned so many things, and as you said, everything can't be covered
right.
from one perspective. So actually, we also got inspiration that we also need to work on that. And climate change is such a big topic. We all are facing it now. We actually got so much information from this interview. Thank you so much for joining us and
Thank you
sharing
so
your
much,
valuable
Anushka.